Hi, Harleen. You've had a front row view to how projects come together at Canvas. What would you say design management is at a studio like ours?
So traditionally, design management is just, if you define it, it's someone that's managing design teams internally, right? Within Canvas, and I feel like I do need to mention this, where Canvas is technically and has always been very design centric, right, or design forward. We've taken a call, and it's been a very conscious choice to have design managers be the folks that are external facing and client facing, right? And also the same people that are interfacing with your internal design teams. So design managers, typically, myself included, are mostly designers or have a heavy background in design. Right? And the reason that this choice has been taken is mostly because when we're talking with clients, right, when we're presenting certain solutions or any number of conversations, there's all sorts of questions that get thrown your way, right? All sorts of doubts that come up. And design managers having the background that they do have, having the know-how that they do have, can actually answer these questions backed with that level of research, backed with that experience. You're a part of that process from the jump, right? And you have that understanding to actually give them the answer that they're looking for or that they need in that moment. Even just taking a brief from a client, right? Or understanding a problem statement. It's not just taking that and bringing it back and handing it over. It's not a simple handoff process to the design team. That's not how we do it. What that actually looks like is truly having that conversation with any number of stakeholders on the client end, getting that understanding, extracting that problem statement, whatever required in that moment, and then digesting it and really just sort of sifting through it a little bit, and then bringing it back to your design team and sort of working with them, right? Not just bringing a problem and handing it over to somebody and saying, okay, you solve it, and then we'll see. Within that process, sure, there's reviews, all of that internally, of course. But once, let's say, the solution in question is ready, even this process, it's not just about taking it and handing it over to a client, right? When one of us is making a delivery or presenting a certain solution, we're not only just going there and handing it off, we're effectively sitting in that room, speaking to them, explaining to them why we've, built in the opportunities that we've built in, why we're proposing the solutions that we're proposing, why we've taken certain design decisions that we've taken, right? And giving that level of understanding to those stakeholders, it definitely needs to be someone that has that level of understanding, right? And comes with that sort of experience, somebody that understands that process and can actually offer the justifications where required. So yeah, that's effectively in a nutshell, what design management at Canvas looks like.
Talking about stakeholders, there have to be moments in the process where you have to say no. How do you go about doing that?
Well, saying no to clients is not as extreme or as literal as that sounds. It's not always just a hard no, right? It's more about, most of the time, it's more about offering an alternative approach and actually letting the stakeholders or clients or whatever we might call them, letting them understand and sort of showing them and offering them that level of documentation, whether it's research or whether it's, trial and error, or whatever you want to call it in that moment, just sort of having that conversation with them and really just giving them that alternative approach. It's not typically just a no, hard stop, not going anywhere, right? That being said, while that is required and we do tend to do a lot of that, right, it's also a very human connection. It's also a very human conversation, right? At the end of the day, whether it's a product manager or whoever, or a project manager in front of you, this is still a relationship that you have with someone on the external end, right? And we've built these relationships over time. Our projects are not short term. And we like to maintain these relationships as well. So it's not typically so much of like anybody taking a stand as much as it's a very sort of collaborative, open conversation, right? And there are moments when we do hit a wall, right? Whether it's for compliance reasons or legal reasons or just a business requirement that cannot be contested any further, right? In those instances, that conversation is more about understanding what those constraints really are, and sort of just trying to get that, trying to really extract what the true problem statement in that moment is. What is the wall that you're hitting, right? If I can understand that, then I can take this back with me and say, okay, that's not, this is not a no. This is not me saying no, and this is not you saying no. This is effectively just constraints that have been put on the project that we're working on. And extracting that problem statement then allows us to also sort of say, okay, let me work with that. Let me see how I can solve this. Let me sit with my team and then come back to you, right? So that's a little bit of what that looks like. I think I also have to mention that there's a lot of instances where clients also have good ideas. They have great ideas sometimes, right? They're in it. They're looking at all the references they need to be looking at, and some of those ideas can be very well informed, but they only need to be shaped a little bit, right? So hearing that out is also part and parcel of the job. It's not just about me sort of earning that trust from a client and saying that, okay, I know better. That's not what this relationship is at all. It is very collaborative. So hearing them out and understanding what they might be suggesting, and even if it requires to be refined as such, right, that is part and parcel of the job. So taking that and saying, okay, that actually might be a very interesting suggestion. Let me take that. Let me see how we can shape it, sand its edges, do all of that, and then bring it back to you. Even that is a very big part of it. So, yeah.
Okay, let's say these solutions or suggestions are conflicting with your current direction. How do you take that feedback to your designers?
Bringing back feedback of that nature. Honestly, it's 90 to 95% of the time, this conversation goes rather smoothly, because internally, the profile of designers that I'm speaking with, right? They're very experienced designers in their own rights, and it's actually easy as long as, like I said, right, if we manage to get the constraints there, or if we manage to truly understand the problem statement that they're coming with, or the alternative solution that they're coming with, or why they're even, hitting these walls. If we have that understanding, and 90 to 95% of the time we manage to get there, then it's a very sort of easy conversation, because it's rather easy for me to bring this back to any of our designers and say, hey, so we did that, and that's great, but now there's all of these new constraints that's been put on top of it. And most of the time they will view it as, okay, newer challenge, right? And let's see how we can solve this problem. It's the same problem with like harder and tighter constraints, and it's most of them will take it in their stride, and it's great. So that's about 95% of the time. 5% of the time, or the smaller percent of the time, right? When we don't have the constraints, or we don't have that answer, then that's a little bit of a different conversation, where the subject of that conversation is effectively, is this a battle we'd like to fight? And, coming back to focusing on the larger picture, more about, don't miss the forest for the trees sort of thing. And that's definitely something that I think all of us have had to learn through our own individual practices, right? And it's most of the time when you picture a designer working on a screen, right? When you're working towards making a screen, you're pitching someone who's working towards pixel perfection. And it is like that sometimes. You can get lost in it. You can work toward like finding the perfect answer toward one component, right? And you can refine it and refine it and refine it. And this is great. And we do bring that level of attention of detail and that level of finesse to every single thing that we do. But there is a moment when you know that, okay, I have to sort of zoom out of this now, right? And take a step back and look at the larger picture. Not every battle is worth fighting. And just keeping that in mind and just having that sort of conversation sometimes when we have hit a wall, if it's a business requirement, and, we've understood that even those people that I'm speaking to, even their hands are tied. there's not much else to say there. Then it's just about saying, okay, we'll find the right answer, we'll find the balance. At the end of the day, whether it's internally, just the design teams, just the design managers, the dev teams, or externally, right? We're all trying to derive the maximum value that we can out of whatever product we're building. So, yeah.
With all these varied contexts, how do you do justice to the work that you're delivering?
Okay, when you talk about delivering large modules or large pieces of an even larger project, right? I think I'd have to start at the beginning to answer this question for you. So when, let's say I were to receive a brief from you for a relatively large module, the first thing that we tend to do is context setting. So first and foremost, we're not going to dive right in and get into like wireframing or anything of that sort. We're going to understand this problem statement, right? And we're really going to understand the context that it lies in. And yes, there is a ton of research there. There's just a lot that's happening, and I'm not going to get into the jargon of it. But largely, it's context setting. It's taking a larger problem. It's about breaking it down into smaller, more digestible pieces, right? To smaller, tinier problems, and sort of separating them a little bit. In doing that, we also then tend to identify what are the little pieces that need to come together to make the larger picture. Once we have that, the larger focus, right, through this is about finding, okay, this is the problem, and this is what we're looking to build. But what is it that we want to achieve, right? Finding that like beacon throughout it all is what we tend to do at this stage, after breaking down the problem, separating it, and just really sort of figuring that context out. We're working towards, okay, what do we want to achieve? So we'll do that, right? Then we go into, of course, planning. So there's obviously two parts to it. One, it's much easier to execute if you've taken a larger-than-life sort of problem statement, and that's a larger-than-life delivery that I need to make. Breaking it down helps in order to execute it, of course. It also helps to sort of plan for it. Now, when we have that, when we've arrived to, let's say, the moment of that solution, and we're bringing it back to our clients, we follow sort of the same pattern where we'll never open a meeting with, okay, you asked us to solve this big problem, to make this big delivery. Here's our wow factor. Here's the interface, right? That's not how we tend to do things. What we'll typically do is there will be a lot of documentation, and we will walk you through this entire process, right? And we'll take you on that journey with us, really. And it's not about storytelling, but it's actually about understanding why we've taken the decisions we've taken, why certain aspects of it, the smaller sort of pieces of it, have come together the way that they've come together. So we'll walk every stakeholder in the room through this entire process, right? And there's several reasons for doing it. One, first and foremost, you need to understand why we're proposing what we're proposing. Two, you also need to be involved in this process. This is your product. This is something that, and we appreciate this so much, that our stakeholders stand by the things that we do, right? It's important for them to also really understand it, collaborate with us on it. And the reason for all of this, the breaking down of this larger problem statement, the smaller pieces, the reason that it works is also there are moments when, let's say we've missed something, or there's been a newer development, or newer constraints have come up within a smaller piece of a very large module. Considering we've broken it down, when you offer those constraints to me, which I may not have been aware of in the past, right? When we planned for this or when we were building it, it's much easier for me now, because this entire problem, or this, let's say, round of feedback is now sandboxed into one small part of this much larger delivery, right? And that's how we can take it on, even in terms of like resource management, right? So solving that within this is a whole lot easier. And, having that plug back into the larger problem so that the solution works, right? That's effectively what we're working toward, right? So taking them through this entire process, and then effectively we are delivering fully fully done interfaces, right? With interactions baked in, all of that. That's what that delivery is still looking like. So when I finally bring you to this, right, you're not just looking at something that, like, I'm expecting you to be wowed by, right? We inherently don't think about like the wow factor over function, right? It's not flair over function. It's actually function over flair. Design is and always has been something that's supposed to be functional first, and we very much agree with that. So the moment that I do show you this, fully done interface, and there is finesse in it, but the thing that's top of the list is still function. So we've arrived for this process. Now you can see it. You've now understood why, what is where, and like how it got here.
You talked about navigating through larger modules. So, how does it feel to work on products that impact users at such a huge scale?
Well, honestly, as someone that's been a part of the process of building these products on a day-to-day basis, I don't think any of us we're not thinking about this. We're not thinking about how many millions of people are going to use this. If there's 100 people that use the product that you're making, or about 1 million people, at any given point in time, you still have one single user that's going to be going through this journey, right? And it's each one of them, right? Every single time there's a user using your product, that's the person that you risk to disappoint. And that's effectively what we're consistently thinking about. Yes, we are aware of how large the user base is, and there's a ton of research done there for us, keep those factors in mind and really like the edges of it. But we're not actively thinking about how many million people are using it. It's more to do with when a person is using it of X and Y profile, how can we not disappoint this person? At the same time, I think we're also very, very aware of the risk involved, considering that a very small fraction of, let's say, about 2 million users is still going to be tens of thousands of people. When you're talking about, 1,000 users or like 10,000 users, a fraction of that might be hundreds. When you're talking millions, it's very different. So higher risk, much higher risk, right? And it's this risk that pushes all of us toward refinement. But there is a very large amount of gratitude for within all of us, I would say, and in just knowing that that's the scale that we're working at. It can also be really hilarious sometimes, because there's so many details that you typically will agonize over, right? And then you see this go into user testing, or sometimes products that are even rolled out, and then long-standing clients will come back to us for it's a relationship that's still maintained, and so on and so forth. They'll come back to us with their level of testing, with their level of feedback that they might have received, and you cannot anticipate how users are actually going to use your product, right? So every single thing that we've agonized over within a certain screen or a certain flow, and we've spent months doing reviews sometimes, they don't even care. They'll go ahead and notice something so irrelevant in everybody's opinion, and that will actually be a problem for anybody using the app in a real moment, right? You cannot anticipate all of this, and there's a lot of that. You just don't know what people are going to do with your product most times, and in those moments, right? I think that's been a lesson with scale for sure, for at least in my mind. In those moments, there's nothing you can do. When someone's coming to you with that level of feedback, or when you're receiving it, right? Absolutely nothing you can say or do. That is not a moment to say, no, but there's so much that back this up. Nope. It's immediately, okay, yeah, we could not have seen this coming, and here we are, right? This is what people are doing with it. So I'm just going to accept that. We're going to take this problem statement, we're going to take it back, and we're going to figure out how to solve it. And then we're just going to fix it this way now. And that's what testing is for. And it's also extremely beautiful. And you see so much of it go awry at scale, right? That it's actually rather interesting. But yeah, I'm just rather grateful, to be honest.
And when you were a student, Did you see yourself doing design management in the future?
It's been a natural path for me to move toward a more management role, right, within my own career. I actually did my master's in design management 5 years ago, and I did, I obviously did really enjoy it. I still remember what my course director told me on the day of my graduation, at after my graduation, at like an informal mixer of sorts, right? He walked up to me and he said, "Hey, this has been great, but whatever you plan on doing, you should look for a place to work at, right? You should look for a job in a place that's going to actually accept you for who you are, and then give you the freedom to, let's say, to not sort of do what I want, but just give me the freedom and the room to really explore what I need to do." And it's in doing that, in finding a place like this, that you'll be able to actually thrive. This is a man who had been my mentor for about a year at that point, right? So I remembered it and I took it rather seriously. But how does one look for that when you come back from like taking a break from work, doing a master's, and then coming back to work? How do you look for that quality? I think I tried, and I had no way of figuring this out. I did a bunch of interesting work for the following few years, and it was great. About 2.5 years ago now, when I came to Canvas, when I joined Canvas, right, I had no way of knowing if it was going to be anything of this nature, or if it, what it was going to be. A few months in, though, I actually started to realize that I truly like and respect every single one of my coworkers, and that is not a common sentence that you can hear. I actually think it's a privilege that I can say it, that I can feel it. I think I'm rather lucky. And off of there, right, a few months in, I started to feel a lot more comfortable. I started to notice that my own individual practice was feeling a lot richer, right? I think it happened for me about the mark of 1 year, just shy of about a year of being here, that I started to feel like I had my feet a little bit planted, a little bit firmer on the ground, right? Everything that I'd learned about design management before, everything that I'd practiced before, all of that was still true, right? And a lot of that was, had come into my practice today. But over the course of that 1 year of being here, right, I'd effectively found a whole bunch of people that I could respect, that I could trust, right, that trusted me. And that allowed me the sort of room to actually explore and learn and try, right, and also fail. And there's been a lot of room for that, because in doing that is when you learn the most, of course. So I just started to feel a lot firmer about where my practice was in that moment. And that's when I started to figure that, of course, I had found a workplace that I could thrive in. And that isn't an easy feat. The fact that there's the amount of trust that's been given to each and every one of us, that we know for a fact that none of us are going to sidestep each other hierarchically or laterally in any shape or way or form, such that somebody will go ahead and take a call or a decision, sidestepping me, such that it would impact my work and my day-to-day. That's not something that'll ever happen. There's just so much transparency between us all, that this is truly the environment that's fostered my growth. And that's what I felt about a year and a half ago, which is when I started to sense that something had shifted within my individual practice. Yes, design management, as I understood it, was still very much the same with, of course, it's evolved, it's improved, all of that. But in that moment, I started to figure that I had my own brand of it. I'd effectively managed to lend myself to my individual practice. And the reason for this happening is just the amount of flexibility, the amount of sort of balance, right? Of freedom, yes, but also of harder conversations sometimes, right? That's what led me here. And if you had all of the design managers within Canvas stand next to each other, as any design studio, we're a fun bunch. We're a bunch of eccentric folks, but more than anything, right? We all have our own brand of it. So even oftentimes we're working on the same project, right? And we're working towards the same thing, but we're following the same process, etc. Right? All of those things are not changing. You'll get, if you as a client were to come to me versus any one of my peers with the same problem statement, we will all solve it, right? And you'd probably get the same outcome out of any one of us, any number of combinations of human beings. You'd still get the solution you desire. But it will be different. We're all going to lend ourselves to this sort of process, and you get a very different experience with each one of us. And we're all very aware of this, right? This isn't a show we're putting on. There's no personas that we're building or any of that. It's so natural, and I know what my strengths and my weaknesses are, right? And yes, keeping those in check, right? Great. And then working on my weaknesses is what everyone's goal is. I also know what any one of my peers, if something that is a weakness for me is a strength for them, it's so easy for all of us to really just walk up to each other and say, hey, this is not something I'm really good at, but I know that you are. Could you help me out? Could you give me a little bit of guidance? Can we do like a quick call on this, or like an hour on this later in the evening? And then, taking that back and learning from them. It's actually truly what's made me feel like work has become very fulfilling for me. And it's actually enriched my own individual practice in a manner that I never thought was possible. So to sort of summarize that, yes, I did think I would eventually be a design manager. I never thought that it could be this fulfilling, or even this sort of, hands-on, in a manner that there's still a focus on craft, right? But I'm still very much leveraging my own strengths here. And yeah, I mean, I just never thought it would be like this. And I'm rather happy about that outcome, so...